This is Hero of Sparta, and Rome was now his. It had only taken 28 years, and his father's dream was half complete. He need only capture 37 more settlements, and the entire world would know forevermore the might of Sparta. By now, Damastor just wanted to kill Gaius Julius to prove a point, but yet again, his path was blocked by the Julii. He won't hear a thing, he says, as he is once more blocked by the Romans. At this rate, Gaius would most certainly hear Damastor coming. Servius Julius stood in Damastor's way, the young boy having just come of age, and just as quickly meeting his end at the hands of Damastor. While Arretium was now plague-free, the same could not be said for Telemacho and Gaius. It wasn't worth the risk of pulling Gaius out of the city in battle for him to retreat and reintroduce the sickness. No, it would be better to wait for either the plague or Damastor to finish him off. With Segesto and Ariminum still bearing the plague, Telemacho heads back north to keep an eye on the nearby Gaul settlements. Clearly, the Scipii couldn't leave well enough alone. Their force was large and somewhat experienced. Aeimnestos was going to need everyone this time. Gathering his troops, he once more marched out to battle the Scipii in defence of Croton. Seeing the Scipii army up close confirmed his suspicions. This was truly a formidable force that they now faced. But Aeimnestos was the son of Sparta, and while he may not have taken to his father's teaching as like his brothers did, hero's blood still ran through his veins, and Aeimnestos knew he would be walking away from this battle victorious. Once more the Romans were sandwiched between the Greeks. While the Scipii were focused on the main army, the reinforcements got into position to once more catch the Romans as they fled. Though it appeared that they had wised up this time and split off a small force to harass the army of Croton while they positioned themselves. Those damned Romans, they were learning! The light cavalry was quickly cutting through the hoplites they had flanked. Aeimnestos charged his bodyguard into the equite, and after some scuffling they had the cavalry fleeing. The other flank wasn't holding great either. The sheer number of Romans and their damned missile attack before they charge was too much for the rookie hoplites, and they break. Aeimnestos came charging from the other side of the line, militia cavalry trying to hold back the infantry on the other side where more hoplites broke and ran. It would be suicide to rush into the infantry, but the exposed veletae would do. Aeimnestos charges into the back of the Hastarte that had broke his troops. While it didn't do much, it gave time for his hoplites to reform and come back. The young son of Sparta continued to race around the battle line, taking down the weaker units and acting the hammer to his hoplites' anvil. While the Romans were most certainly behind his front line, the battle was definitely turning in his favour. Aeimnestos continues to charge into the Romans pinned by his hoplites, and with the captain falling, the rest of the Scipii army are soon fleeing from the battlefield. The fleeing Scipii troops predictably barged themselves into the army of Croton, and mirroring the last battle, hordes of peasants charged into the superior Roman troops. While the peasants didn't really achieve much, they were able to hold the Romans in place for the archers to fire down on them. It took some time and some peasant sacrifices, but the Scipii had lost the battle. Aeimnestos didn't want any of the Romans remaining on the peninsula, and so the rest of the army was hunted down. With the last few units being shot down by the archers of Croton.
This is a heroic victory, worthy of Greek soldiers.
And with that, Aeimnestos has another victory under his belt, leaving 84 Romans to go back to their masters whimpering. Perhaps now they will learn. Ridding the world of those foul Romans, Aeimnestos returns home, bringing with him confidence in his ability to command and a Roman turncoat. It appeared that his father's lessons were not lost on him in the end. Aeimnestos had had plenty of time to prove his worth, and now it was time for his brothers to do the same. Xanthippus was taking the lead on this battle, though both he and Dymas were equally inexperienced, but they had the numbers advantage, and Cretan archers. The Gaul consisted mostly of light infantry, but with the occasional swordsman, these barbarians were not going to go down without a fight. With no siege equipment, the Gaul pulled back and to the right of the city, the Cretans thinning their numbers as they ran. Once the Gaul were clear of the front gates, the hoplites emerged, the Cretans still firing down. With the hoplites now mostly lined up outside the city, 2 units of Cretans would join them, forming a second line. The hoplites and Cretans marched forth to the edge of the city, and the archers fired down upon the shirtless warband, quite easily cutting through their numbers. The Gaul would try and charge the Greeks many times, but while not being as well trained and equipped as heroes, the Cretans are quick to end such attempts. Soon enough, the Cretans ran out of arrows and it was time for Xanthippus to save the day. While Xanthippus got behind the Gaul line, the Cretans returned to the safety of the city. Xanthippus charges through the Gaul line, hitting and pushing through a unit of skirmishers and warband unscathed. He loops around and separates a unit of skirmishers. They were tough and resisted Xanthippus for some time, but they eventually gave up the fight and ran. The hoplites moved closer to the Gaul, and Xanthippus continued to harass the rear of the Gaul. The hoplites draw the barbarians into combat, and with Hero's oldest coming in from behind, the Gaul are quick to break. The last few troops are ridden down or escaped into the distance. Either way, Xanthippus and Dymas win their first battle, though most of it was done by Xanthippus. As such, his abilities as a commander to grow. As summer turns to winter, the Julii try to best Admiral Dion once more, but Dion continues to readily show them otherwise. The winter of 240 BC also brings some tragic news. Cleomenes of Sparta has passed away at the age of 62, and while he did not get to see his son conquer the world, at least he got to see the Roman seat of power in Greek hands, and Hero becomes the new leader of the Spartan Greeks. Damastor was stood right next to the city. There was no possible way the Julii could get in the way this time. Sneaking into Arretium, the assassin's pride is once more restored as he slips away into the night. Gaius' throat slit and his cooling blood pooling on the floor of his bedchambers. With his recent victory giving him confidence, Xanthippus feels ready to take on his father's legacy. He moves east to Thessalonica to gather his own force. With the plaguey Gaius out of the way, Hero was now ready to take on Arretium, but first he needed to get rid of some of the surrounding armies. 3 waves of Julii and Sextus Julius, it was doable. But one of the teams had ballista. And with the city having onagers, that was 2 teams too many with artillery. Hero had the liberty to shape this encounter, and shape it he does. Hero pushes back the ballista team and pursues the main Julii force, eventually bringing them, Arretium and Sextus Julius into battle. The Julii had Hero outnumbered 2 to 1. The Greek leader grinned. All the more men for he and his troops to cut down. The 2 armies squared up to one another, and some of the Cretans got to work doing what they did best, the others waiting in reserve for when the Romans' reinforcements would arrive. The Romans' front line fell like all the others, unable to withstand the onslaught from the Cretans' arrows. Soon enough, the Cretans had killed all they could reach. They needed to move up. Slipping in front of the Spartans, they were quick to draw over the Julii's infantry. They waited until the last possible moment to fall back behind the spearmen, bringing the Julii into range of a ready unit of archers. Reduced in numbers, the Julii fall back to their line. The Cretans repeat this again and again. They were nearing the end of their arrowed reserves, but most of the Julii had to be lying dead on the ground at this point. There was no time for a gradual assault, though. Hero's runner came racing in. The Julii reinforcements had arrived. There would be some time until they made it to the main battlefield, but this fight needed to end now. The Spartans marched forth, closing in on the Romans and the Spartans enduring the reign of Pila from the Romans. Hero made his way round to the sides of the Julii line, charging into the preoccupied infantry and easily cutting them down. The Spartans marched through the Romans, causing them to break like fine china. Hero chased down the retreating stragglers, while the Spartans herded the rest of the Romans between their spears. The captain flees, but the Spartans weren't going to let him escape his fate that easily.
Now he flees the field like a coward. The enemy general is slain, and now
During the chaos, Sextus Julius had arrived. Though his efforts would be in vain, he had arrived too little, too late. Half of the Spartans worked on mopping up the remaining Julii, while the rest got lined up and ready for the second battle on this field. Returning to his force, Hero cuts through the Roman general. Poor guy didn't even stand a chance.
enemy's hearts are full of fear, and now they flee.
The Greeks were ready for round two. They had the high ground and a unit of cavalry was already sneaking around the side, ready to ambush the onagers that the Romans had foolishly let fall behind. The Greeks did not have high expectations of Roman intelligence, but to try firing artillery at moving cavalry, that was a new level the Romans had sunk to. Before the cavalry had chance to charge into the artillery, the Romans caught on to the Greek plan and returned from their march at the main force. At any rate, the first unit of Greek cavalry was able to distract the Romans while a smaller second unit swooped in from the sides. The onager crew had spotted them and tried firing their boulders down upon the horsemen, but as proved before was very ineffective. The cavalry slipped by the infantry and charged right into the artillery crew. They pulled back to get another charge and finished the job. That was one problem solved, now for the rest of the army. The archers spent their remaining arrows as the Julii approached. They raced before the front line and the Greeks were eager to meet them. Breaking one unit, the Spartans quickly moved onto the war dogs that tried to flank the Greeks. The dogs and their handlers did not last long against the Spartans. Wanting the battle to be over sooner rather than later, Hero orders his Spartans to advance. Marching down, the spearmen deal with the Romans swiftly, tearing down men and morale. And before long, the Romans were running home scared, and the cavalry are deployed to keep them from getting back to the city.
enemy army is in flight! Pursue them! Drive them from the battlefield!
The last few men are cut down and victory was theirs.
Attack!
Waiting for orders.
Gods be praised! This victory is surely their work, not that of mortals like us.
Victory! My lord!
Hero occupies the empty city of Arretium and exterminates her unhappy people. It simply couldn't be helped. The Scipii dare to prepare another transport fleet, and the brave Greek fleets are quick to show them the errors of their ways.
The sea is up! Ships ready!
Pushed back, the Greeks chase and sink the Scipii ships.
The sea is out!
Ready for greater things, Aeimnestos takes a small contingent of troops and begins his trek north. With Arretium cleared of Romans, it was time for Damastor to pick a new location to haunt. Segesta had Vibius Julius, the faction heir, and Ariminum had Lucius Julius. Both targets perhaps a bit too ambitious. Though outside the city stood a suitor, or newly adopted member. Damastor did not care for his circumstances of joining the family, because either way, Damastor would be making sure he left it this day. Xanthippus finishes his journey to Thessalonica, and the city begins preparation of his force. With winter arriving, it was time for Hero to move on in his quest. Leaving Arretium in the trustworthy hands of his loyal peasants, Hero gathers his men and moves on to Segesta and builds 3 rams.
Prepare for battle! Besieging settlements!
Aeimnestos arrives in Capua, providing the city of peasants with some much needed troops. He would continue moving north in time. It had taken him many seasons of travelling, but in the summer of 238 BC, Theophrastos makes it into Thracian land. He scoped out the capital. Attacking the faction heir was perhaps a bit above his skill level. He continued exploring the land, eventually bumping into an old friend. Gydras wouldn't be escaping from us this time. Theophrastos would ensure that in the winter. In the meantime, the rams were built and it was time to rid the Romans of one more city. Vibius did not have much of an arsenal available, and the man himself had most certainly not used his 60 years wisely. The Greeks lined up before the front gate, the Cretans getting into range and thinning out the crowd of Romans. Perhaps sick of life, or just truly senile in his old age, Vibius Julius paraded his bodyguard in front of the Greeks. The Cretans cut through his horsemen like they were wet tissue paper. But the man marched on, seemingly oblivious to his guard falling around him. Was this his way of guaranteeing a warrior's death? No, old age must have had its cold and bony hands wrapped tightly around him, as he rode on, seemingly blind and deaf to the world around him. Perhaps it was a small mercy for the Cretans to take him with a single shot.
Gods be praised! The enemy general is killed! Fear makes a home in our enemies' hearts!
The ram easily breaks down the gate, and the archers don't even break a sweat, removing the guard. The Spartans approach the plaza, and the Cretans draw the defending Hastarte over. The infantry don't last long against the spearmen, and the archers finish them off. The plaza now cleared, the Spartans march on to capture the city. With 5 seconds left, the archers give a suitable end to a squirreled away bodyguard.
Fit for the gods, a day of triumph to mark with the sun!
And with the loss of only a single Spartan, Segesta now belonged to the Greeks. But you see, things were going too well, so the game crashes again. The battle goes much the same, with the squirreled away bodyguard amazingly occurring again. The Cretans send him to the underworld with a little more flair this time.
Not that of mortals like us!
At the end of the battle, a single Spartan feels a chill down his spine, as if someone had walked over his grave. Segesta is captured and her people enslaved. They were happy enough, no need to senselessly kill them. Summer transitions into winter, and the Julii besiege both Rome and Arretium. Cheeky little buggers. The army that held Rome hostage was rather paltry, though it may prove a challenge for the city of peasants that Aeimnestos had just moved into. In Ariminum, the plague had disappeared, though, through luck perhaps, it was not gone altogether. Leaving the city and returning, Telemetro reintroduces the plague to the city once more. In the change of seasons, Guydress was able to slip away from Theophrastos' gaze. No matter, it appeared the Thracians had finally captured Byzantium, and that Bryzos was rather quite vulnerable. Nighty-night, Bryzos. It was time to deal with some pesky Romans. Aeimnestos was getting pretty good at these counter-sieges. The peasants of Rome are lined up outside her walls, drawing the Roman archers over. In Aeimnestos' hurry to get into position to flank, he knocks down some of his troops. The archers retreat behind their infantry and Aeimnestos pulls back, the Principe eagerly following. Hundreds of peasants charge into the heavy infantry, their small daggers bouncing futilely off of the Romans' armour. But that was all they needed to do, hold them in position for the Greek archers or Aeimnestos to finish them off. With the infantry distracted, Aeimnestos charged into the enemy archers and light cavalry. It was going well. Until it wasn't. The number of Romans overwhelmed the young general and his spirit broke. This was hopeless, surely a bunch of peasants couldn't fight off trained soldiers, these peasants that were valiantly holding their own. Aeimnestos couldn't abandon them now. Turning around, he chased off the equites and archers, while the swarm of peasants finished off the Principe.
Now they flee.
And Aeimnestos helped finish off the last man. Standing amongst his cheering men, Aeimnestos couldn't believe he had doubted them at all. The remains of the Julii forced retreat back into Ariminum, not that the minimal number of archers and horsemen would help them in the long run, and Aeimnestos continues to improve in his abilities. Soon he will be ready to run his own campaign. Arretium did not have the same advantage of having a general in their force, never mind the fact that the army that held him captive was much larger. Hero would need to step in. He leaves Segesta with his army, dedicating enough of the population to training to sate their unhappiness. Hero marches across the land and forces Captain Julianus away from his freshly conquered city. It was a fortunate day for the Julii, as Hero was unable to reach them after they hid behind his city. And so the transition to a new year begins. All is well and nothing of importance appears to happen. Hero was thinking over his next move when a messenger came running up to him, and a scroll was placed into his hands. The last of the Julii had fallen. The second noble Roman house had fallen, leaving only those dogs on Sicily. Either rage had taken the old man or the plague finally got to him. Either way, Ariminum was ripe for the taking. Money was never an issue, and so Pentheus the diplomat approached the newly independent city and made them an offer. Name your price and it will be so. 33,000 denarii was pocket change at this point, and so the city proclaimed itself Greek. It takes a couple of attempts to get peasants into Ariminum, moving diplomats, assassins and ex-Julii armies that were in the way. The people still weren't happy about being occupied, but they would learn to deal with it. From Rome, Aeimnestos travels north to join up with his father, and Damastor deals with his Gaul rival. Telemetro makes his way from Ariminum north to Mediolanum, ready for the next stage of Hero's Campaign. There we go, it only took us 10 parts, but we finally have the whole of Greece and the Italian peninsula. I would say that we have well and truly reached the halfway point of this series and the end of where I have pre-recorded to, so forgive me if any of the next couple of videos are a little late, as we're going to start speeding through the turns and focusing on the capture of settlements. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!